Welcome back to the Battle Belongs podcast here. I am a co-host, Mr. Cuba, with Coleton Furlow.
Your intros get worse and worse.
What is going on?
Every week.
And then I'm going to just jump right into it. A special guest today, Mr. David Neace. Neace's Nuggs, maybe how you know him. He's also a father, a husband. He does host his own podcast, Neace's Nuggs. He's the BCM director at Coastal Carolina, works for the Southern Baptist, or the state of South Carolina Baptist Association. Mentor of mine, phenomenal friend, gifted in administration, but also gifted in just loving college students, man. You've been doing this for over 10 plus years, I think.
Well, at 11 and a half here.
11 and a half years.
About 17 total.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think he is the oldest guest we've had on the podcast.
About 35
That
years old.
is something I'd never expected to hear so early in my life.
Also a Georgia Bulldog grad.
That's right.
Oh, really?
I
You
did
didn't know
graduate from the University
No.
of Georgia. Therefore, I am allowed to cheer for them and not get kickback, West Virginia fans.
Ugh.
Yeah.
He is my pickleball rival as well.
That is true. These two are pickleball legends in the area of Conway, South Carolina. We came up short at Converge. David is a two-time champion this summer with our league that we run. Right, 2 years or 2 times.
Something like that.
Say my number. Say my number.
No, we don't need
Say
to
my
talk
number.
about that.
Colton has -4.
That's right.
Yeah.
Still waiting to get my paddles framed.
Last time we had an individual battle. I know who won that though.
Oh,
Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe.
Yes.
Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Joe. I didn't think he was going to stay awake through the rest of the game. I thought it was past his bedtime. He was missing his nursing home.
That was
pudding.
Colton's way of trash talking me.
Sleepy
Speaking of
Joe.
Joe Biden,
Is he like what?
Is he alive?
Is there much to say?
We have not seen a picture of him on the beach lately, but I think it's just cold.
That's true.
Yeah,
Where does he live outside of like?
Delaware.
Really?
yeah, Wilmington, right?
Yeah, just outside of Wilmington.
So like, all right, this might be a dumb question from somebody that doesn't really know politics that well, but they live in the White House, the president.
Very good, PJ.
We are 1 for 1.
So like a 4-year run, and then it's like, all right, go back to your other house.
Yeah,
It's typically what happens.
Wow.
I think
Yeah.
Eight is the max, though. Right.
yeah.
That is
think-
correct.
Thank God we didn't have to go 8 under Biden. But they left the White House and went straight to California?
Yeah, he packed up stuff and then he went and signed some agreement in California to work for some agency out there. But I don't think he's in California right now. I think he's back in Wilmington.
Is he dead or alive? That's just what I want to know.
I think he's
We do
alive.
not have confirmation one way or the other.
Yeah.
Was he alive during the presidency, or is this like a fake? Was it a clone?
You ever been to one of those wax museums?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes I wondered, like, are we already working on the wax figures? Like, what is happening right now?
He's a
That's-
walking
That's
wax
the way we
figure.
felt our country was run for 4
Yeah.
years.
So this is one of my types of episodes because
You're wearing the hat too, so
Oh,
like we already
goodness.
know
I am.
the direction.
I'm not wearing the Trump hat.
No,
it's a
but-
red hat. It's a political hat.
It's a government hat, or yeah, it's a political hat.
Yeah, because we have our CPAC conference next week. I leave Monday, and I thought, what better way to prepare for the conference than to have a little political Christian discussion? We haven't had one on the podcast with you in it since probably
Before-
Pastor B, right before the election.
Yeah,
That was the last time we talked. So we just basically talked like
we talked
why
about
it's-
Trump being back in office. That we did an episode on that.
No, you weren't here.
We did it back there.
Over there.
Back to me. This is my podcast. We now you made me lose my train of thought. We talked about like the importance of voting and Christians voting, but now after the election, we have Trump back in, and he's been on a roll. Would you say he has not put his pen down? He's been doing a lot, and I don't think he plans on stopping. And I'd say, what would you grade him so far? I'd say like a solid 8 out of 10 since he's come back in office.
Yeah, I mean, I think effort-wise, we're like up in the 9s, right? Some of his talking points have reminded me of when he got like sideways the first administration. But as far as policies and certain things, he is fulfilling promises that he made to the American people.
Yeah.
In several areas, there's some things that are still kind of, what's this guy doing? But I would say for what he promised he was going to do, he's getting to work, especially since it's only been like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's moving at rapid speed.
Yeah.
What do you think is like one of your top favorite things that he's done so far since getting back to the White House?
I mean, I know it's really controversial, and I know it is for a lot of reasons. But man, I think one of America's biggest problems for a lot of areas is the excessive bureaucracy and the size of government that we've built up. And so it's almost like over the last 20 to 30, it's not just one president, it's not just
Right.
Biden or Obama. I mean, it's been literally the last 40 to 60 years is the answer to unemployment or the answer to anything is let's just build a whole nother government agency, hire a bunch of people, and then say we've created jobs.
Right.
And so I actually enjoy the daily reports of the money that they have found in different places that is being wasted.
Yeah, you mean like money for condoms in Gaza?
Well, yeah, that. And I was even listening to something today like, well, we need proof of some of these things. And the reality is it's going to come out. But, or even, hey, FEMA spending money on housing migrants in luxury hotels in New York City. Like, is this legit? Because if it's legit, why are we spending money there when FEMA is supposed to be helping disaster relief people in North Carolina or other places, California, like, for example. So some of that stuff, man, I just think that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
That we're going to get to see how much money and why our taxes are so, like, it's just this avalanche that's about to happen. Like, the reason our taxes are so much is because we're funding a government that's way too big.
Excessive spending.
Yeah.
We can't balance our budget. So I assume like you're following Doge and all of that. What do you think about that? What do you think about Elon Musk and all of that?
I mean, he's getting like this bad rap, but from what I can tell, he's not taking a single penny.
Right.
He's not making any money. He's like rescuing astronauts and creating Starlink and helping things out. But as far as like what he's doing to help the efficiency of our government, he's not getting paid anything. And like, suddenly, like, people are portraying him as he's like the Antichrist, which makes no sense at all. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he benefits long term through something like by being a business owner and some other things. But I also think it's very interesting that him and Vivek Ramaswamy didn't last too long together. Very different personalities. And so, but I mean, I think it needs to happen. So somebody who has successfully done that, like as soon as he bought Twitter, now X, he did the exact same thing with that. So we had like the blueprint of what that would look like. Got rid of employees, not because he just wanted to fire them, but because they were unnecessary and not doing anything.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny when they first like came up with this idea of Doge. The left was like, well, how efficient is that they're hiring 2 people to do a one-person job? And I was like, no, they're not even taking a cent.
Right.
And it's volunteers who are going to be working in that department. So I really hope that we see a balanced budget. Do you even know what we're talking about right now?
Sure.
Doge and everything. Department.
I was thinking of Bitcoin when you said Doge.
Bitcoin.
So.
I think that's kind of like where the idea came from of the name, but it's Department of Government Efficiency. So basically getting rid of all that wasteful spending. The whole thing about condoms and Gaza was real.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. I was very confused.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to accurately get a picture of is no matter what side you're on, you're getting one side of the story too, right? And so, like, left media are portraying this as Trump's trying to get rid of every department, right? Whereas the right is like, we're saving all this money, and like the truth is it's somewhere in between. And so, like, for example, even with like the Department of Education and different things they've talked about, like with wasteful spending, and like the goal is not to get rid of everything. The goal is to figure out what is needed and what is government's responsibility for the American people to help sustain the states. Things like
Just
this.
get back to the basics.
Get back to what they're supposed to do instead of what they're like taking over what they're not supposed to do. So.
Okay, so I kind of thought like we could do this episode basically an umbrella topic of like what is the Christian's faith role in American politics, because that can go like 10 different routes. We can take it many different directions, but a lot of people, first off, I think we should go down this road of people say that faith and religion doesn't belong in politics. When you hear that, what is like your first immediate response?
I think that they don't say that about anyone else. There's no other category of people where they say you can't speak into politics. That's my first thing. So politics by like its definition and creation is like the people are involved in the process, and specifically with the way the United States was formed as a constitutional republic, right? And Like, we are the people who make these decisions. So when we talk about like what the common thing, I didn't grow up in a necessary political conversation home. In fact, in my home, like, we didn't talk about it. I remember asking my mom or my dad. I went to the voting booth when I was little, stand in line for a long time. And I was like, well, who are you voting for? And they wouldn't even tell me, even when I was in high school, or like, it was just not talked about. Now, I could kind of tell based on some of our thoughts and policies and things. I could guess who they voted for. Grew up in Georgia, which used to be a big red state. It's kind of changed over the years. So we didn't really talk about it. But as I've even grown up, it's the very first thing you hear is, especially with faith in politics too, is like, oh, the separation of church and state, which is a whole nother conversation about like, what does that even mean? Like, some people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be involved in politics. But the whole purpose of the separation of church and state was so that the government wouldn't regulate faith, not so that the faith wouldn't impact government.
Yeah, it's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion.
Right.
And so I would say to that is like, okay, well, let me ask you, should we as Christians, and should legislatures who are Christians, pastors, whatever, should they be basing their political policy and how they govern based off of their beliefs?
Yes. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we have to answer this question for the United States of America, right? And the reality is, as a Christian, the Bible should impact and direct our thought process with everything, not just politics. And so, but we also need to recognize that the God we serve is not just a God of the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, to try to create a theocracy of like the United States is this God country, I don't think that's an accurate picture of what's going on in Scripture. In fact, I would compare the United States more to like Babylon or something else than necessarily like what Israel was, for example. So yes, in the sense of like there are even in Scriptures we see examples where God tells the people to live in such a way and to be involved in the life of that country. So for example, in Jeremiah 29, God's people are in exile, and everyone likes to quote Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you. Like, it's a great verse, right? But the reality is, like they're going to be in exile for a long time. And so what happens in Jeremiah 29, the chapter is God's telling them, like, live amongst the people, plant vineyards, invest in the community for the flourishment of everyone, for your neighbors and everything else, so that in the midst of exile, in the midst of people who don't know Yahweh, they can meet Yahweh. And so if you take that mindset, even in our politics, like, yeah, we should live in such a way to influence even the government or in politics through our faith for the flourishment of everything else. If we think the Bible is the correct way to live, like the way to know God and the way to impact society, and then we should have those convictions even in our politics. So I think to answer your question with somebody, for example, a congressman, right, or a president, like, at the end of the day, like, if I'm elected to represent my community, I am a representative of them, but I'm also need to be true and honest when when I'm running for office, that these are my convictions. And so they've elected me based off these convictions, and hopefully I represent them. I think too many politicians become whoever the people want them to be, so they can get elected. And then they just play games the rest of the time. Yeah. They don't really have convictions, and their faith doesn't really impact. Oh yeah, I'm a Christian. If that makes get votes, right? Or I'm a Catholic or whatever. Like, yeah. But at the end of the day, like, they have no moral compass based on Scripture, no knowledge of who God is, and so, anyways, I don't know if I answered your question.
Do you think that we've Americanized Christianity, like, because there's so many people that we live in the Bible Belt, we live in the South, and a lot of people dictate, like, they'll see, like, if Biden was in office, like, they're almost, like, Christians are acting in a way that we should never act. And then when Trump's in office, it's almost like we are worshiping him rather than Jesus. So, like, do you think there's a common issue there that needs to be addressed amongst the church?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I would go further and say that people in the church have made an idol of Trump.
Yes.
Right? And Trump, for his policies, let's just say this, I'm not a Trump guy, okay? But I think his policy, I voted for Trump, and here's why. People are like, oh, you can't vote for Trump and not like, hate me, whatever. The reality is, like, the reason is because his policies were more in line with my policies than the other side.
Right.
But here's what I can even tell you about when Trump was running for office. When Trump was shot, right, and survived, and then began to use that story very cleverly, almost used it to portray himself as the savior.
Mm-hmm.
Right, God kept me alive for a reason, and these things, and he even weaved that into the inauguration address and everything else. And I think the Christians have thought, man, this is what we've been praying for, right? And not that we don't like some of those policies, but we don't idolize a politician, right? We worship a savior, and Trump is far from that. And so I do think that. I think that in that, I think Christians have done a lot of harm to how they engage with people who don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think society in general is so polarized that if you voted for Kamala, then people on Trump's side are like, how, there's just this huge divide no matter who you voted for, because I think Christians and even just conservative non-Christians have idolized this idea of having this guy in office that we've completely lost touch with how to communicate
like
with anyone else.
Separating, like, people spiritualize things like the Trump shooting versus, like, trusting in the sovereignty of God. Like, there's a separation there, because we spiritualize everything.
100%.
Yeah. So
I think that's a good point, because we talked about this before, like early on. There's like different camps of conservative Christians. There's the conservative Christian who like worships Trump, who does not call him out on anything. There's the camp of the conservative Christian who loves his policies but will call him out when he does wrong. And I think that's where we're both in,
right.
all three of us. And then there's like the camp of the Christians that just kind of stay out of politics altogether. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the ones that we're trying to reach, is to get them involved and, just help make society a better place, even if it's through government policies. But I have this thing on Facebook. So you're talking about like idolizing Trump and everything. And when you're the person who can be vocal and stand your ground and call him out on things, in the conservative world, we get pushback all the time, especially me when I'm actually working in politics. So I shared a thing from Costi Hinn. I don't know who this is.
Yep.
But it's
you don't know who that is?
No.
Great pastor.
No.
Benny Hinn?
Benny Hinn's nephew.
I don't know who that is.
Great
either.
story there.
It's amazing.
Dude, I'm still a baby Christian.
Benny Hinn was like this prosperity, like healing guy who was exposed for any reasons, and that's his nephew, right?
Yeah.
Who like is theologically sound and
Polar opposite.
has his own issues too, but
yeah.
basically is willing to stand up and take heat for things. So
Well, did you see his thing about Trump?
I didn't see it.
Okay,
No.
so it says, after much appreciation for the current administration's positions on gender, traditional views, economic strength, and border policies, we still must be under no illusions. They're not our allies on abortion, though not as worse as the previous administration vocally celebrating the murder of children. And then number two, he says Trump is not saved and has a heretic now in charge of the White House Faith Office, and we'll get into that in a second. And number three, professing Christians who are obsessed with conservatism but not burning with a deep affection for Christ will be angered by anyone calling a spade a spade. Sorry, but truth doesn't get ignored because we favor Republican policies. And I think number three is so prevalent in today's society. As a conservative Christian who I've always called out Trump, especially on abortion, his stances on abortion. I'm for no abortion, no exceptions whatsoever. And he's for, well, if this happens and this happens, well, that doesn't reflect the Bible.
He's actually even moved since his original. Like he originally was no abortion except for exceptions, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's like, well, it's a state's issue.
Yeah.
Right? He's actually like taking his hands off. So I would, yeah.
So what do you think about like, how do you navigate as a Christian who can criticize him and you get backlash on that? I don't know if you do it publicly, but advice to Christians.
I have conversations. I think at the end of the day, I think society in general is in this era of toxic cancellation that people just fear, right? They just fear making comments and fear because they don't want to say something wrong or be criticized. And at the end of the day, like, you have to be content with whatever happens. Obviously, doing and speaking in love. But if something like I think I saw that maybe, but what you just referenced, this idea of like, I personally, when you examine the fruit of someone in office, right, and like when their life is publicly on display, it's clear to examine a lot what's going on.
Right.
And the reality is, the fruit of the Spirit is not exuded from our president in the White House. And so, while he may claim to be a Christ follower, if his actions were somebody that was sitting on this couch close to us, we could probably talk and be like, bro, there's no fruit in your life. Like,
Right. I've never even heard him talk about Christ or Jesus. Like Christ, I've never heard him say the word Christ and Jesus or Jesus. Yeah. It's always God. But what God?
Right. So I think this is my personal opinion. I think he falls into like the cultural Christian, like America. That's the kind of way he thinks it is. And
celebrity.
And so, like that, you have to understand that, like, in the sense of he is operating from this worldview, right? And it's a distortion ultimately of how he treats people and different things. But for us, we have to call things out, right? Just because, like, I'm very happy that he won the election versus Kamala Harris.
Amen.
If the Democrats had put up anyone with any character, they probably would have won the election, to be completely honest, right? And so it wasn't an issue of like, and this is my personal take, I think there is a growing conservatism. People like realize that we need to kind of get back on track. But I also just think we had two terrible candidates in the sense of, like, when you're examining, and I think the least terrible candidate won. And I do like his policies. I do like the fact that he's like trying to make America feel like a better place. But I think it's okay to call things out. Like, for example, like, as Christ followers, we believe that God created life, and only he has the right to define the terms of that. And so, yeah, Trump's not pro-life.
Yeah.
He's not. He did appoint some judges who, at the end of the day, overturned a decision that probably should have been overturned to begin with. But even that decision, like, doesn't necessarily take away rights, because it still has to go to the states and all these things. And so the issue is, like, Trump's not out there advocating for the end of abortion.
Right. He's just less anti-abortion than the left.
Correct. And so it's okay to stand that up. Like, at the end of the day, like, I am. Like, I have friends who are huge posting right now about immigration and everything. At the end of the day, like, we're not anti-immigration, right? But at some point, the pendulum has to swing back to get some control over what does immigration look like, healthy immigration, right? And the idea is, if people are here illegally, the Bible doesn't tell us to, like, keep them here illegally. Like, there are borders in the Bible, like countries defend them. Like, and so there's a sense of order where even in that, like, I think some of the rhetoric Trump uses is terrible, right? Like, not every person that came to over the border in Mexico is a rapist or a criminal or mental institute. Do those people exist? 100%. But the whole point is, we don't know who's coming into the country. And there are people, long lines of people, who are trying to come into our country legally through the right processes. They're paying taxes. They're going through the immigration. And it's been decades that they're trying to get status. And then it's about people circumventing that and just walking across. And so for me, it's more about rhetoric of some of those issues, but like calling it out and be like, no, like, we are pro-immigration, right? And that's a biblical value. Like, God cares about refugees and God cares about these things. And so we should care about them. But at the same time, just because we want our borders to be safe doesn't mean that we're anti-refugee or those things. All that to say, I think it's okay to call out. And, like, you just you have to have convictions, know what you believe, and not get your convictions from Fox News or CNN or News Nation
MSNBC.
or whatever they are. Like, I don't consider them a network, right? Like, the reality is, like, your biblical convictions, your faith, should impact your politics. What's happening is our politics is directing our faith in a lot of places.
Write that down.
And so people, like Christians, have to get it right? And so I think the negative of this whole idea of separation of church and state and faith and politics is we have a lot of Christians and a lot of people who go to church who want the politics to make their life look like a certain way that's not even biblical, and they're not letting their faith impact their politics.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, but Trump. I mean, we got Paula now.
Oh my gosh, I just want to throw up.
So don't you think we're heading in a better direction?
No.
So I don't even really know who she is until this all came out. Apparently
She's a fraud.
she was advising him on the campaign trail and in 2016 as the faith leader. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, the White House, President Trump has reestablished the faith office of the White House, and it's Paula what? Paula White?
Abdul?
We might be more successful if it was Paula Abdul.
I don't even know her last name.
I'm so
It's
lost.
Paula White, right?
Paula White.
Okay,
Isn't that who it is?
Paula White in the White
Is that what
House.
her name is?
Yeah.
Okay, so give me both
could
of
be
your
wrong,
takes because I don't know anything about her other than what I've just seen on Facebook. I've seen a lot of people applauding great things because Trump
She
reestablished.
said it's unbiblical to deny yourself.
Deny yourself what?
Deny
Just
yourself,
in anything?
Yeah, you have a greater purpose in this life. Like God is calling you to a bigger plan with bigger funds.
So prosperity.
And, yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the top tier. She's up there with Kenneth Copeland. And I also I don't. There's a lot of different takes on women pastors, but biblically speaking, we just don't see it in Scripture, and so there's so many red flags here. And so this is one of those things too. This conversations where it's well, at least they're he's establishing a faith side to the White House, but from a Bible believing Christian, don't you think that we should be that? That's almost even worse than not having a faith policy or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it has the potential to do far worse damage than had it not been created to begin with. I think presidents, if you go back, and I don't know all of their advisors, but for decades, presidents have had faith advisors in either official roles or unofficial roles. I know Billy Graham was a faith advisor for multiple presidents, both Democratic and Republican, right? But there wasn't an official position or thing for him to rule. I mean, I think that what we desire is for a president who is impacted by faith, who has a faith, right? And then that helps, and then a faith advisor to kind of do that. That's not what this is. This is more of creating again, this is my personal opinion. It's one of those things hey, I told you I was a Christian, so I'm going to create this office, and I'm going to put this person here.
For display.
And because I made her a promise that if she did, there's so many of those things that at the end of the day, I don't think it accomplishes much good, except for it's hey, I told you I was going to do this. I told you I'm this person, and I did it. But as far as impacting, I think it has far worse possibilities because what the version of the gospel she preaches and the version of what you even just said, that's not what we see in Scripture, right? It's not. We see Christ, who, though was king, humbled himself to come serve.
Yeah.
Right? We see examples of humility and emptying yourself, being a servant leader. We see examples of, hey, the gospel might cost you your life, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
We don't see it's wrong to deny yourself. We see, no, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow Jesus. So everything is opposite. So at the end of the day, that's not the version of God that we want portrayed. It's not the version of what it looks like to be a Christ follower, because that's not what's going to fill you or satisfy you or even get you into a relationship with God. Because in order to come to it, you have to deny yourself.
Yeah.
So
I feel we just keep taking one step forward and two steps back when it comes to anything faith-based with Trump. So we kind of touched on this, and you answered several questions regarding if you were an elected official, how you would navigate different issues that your constituency, might disagree with you on. So were you saying that you would basically, stick to the Bible values and principles that you have because you basically laid them out on the campaign trail and they trusted in you to make the right decision? For abortion?
Yeah, it depends. So
marriage.
I hate to say it depends, and I'm not in any way saying situational ethics. I think it depends on the office you're in and what your role in. So the way politics works, right? Specifically, and I'm not trying to give you a political science lesson here, but our government has three
PJ
branches.
needs it.
PJ, okay. So our government has three branches, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that they all serve different functions, or they should, right? They should. The way that our founding fathers created this experiment was that they were to serve different functions, and there was a balance of power. And so there's a difference between me being the president of the United States, or me being, and I would equate that to be like a governor of a state, versus being a representative in the House, right, or a senator. Like, those have different roles and different functions. And so at the end of the day, I don't know, and because I'm not in those positions, like if I was the governor of South Carolina and a bill came to my desk, well, if I agree with it, obviously I'm going to sign it. If I don't agree with it, I mean, that's why we do have vetoes, right? That's why there can be sent back. And now there's also a way for that to be overturned. And presidents have done that, and governors have done that before. I think as an elected representative or a senator, it is very clear that you should pursue what your convictions are that put you in those positions. Because you're the ones writing bills. You're the ones, working across the aisle to come to terms with certain, so to me, that's a far easier conversation, right? Like, hey, I'm running for U.S. House or South Carolina House representative seat, and I want to, for example, help get the heartbeat bill passed or whatever, or I want to help with taxes. I want to help get a road in Horry County. Like, there's so many issues even locally here that like you can run on, and like those would what you'd be working towards. It's a far different conversation when you're in the president or a governor, where you aren't writing the bills. You're obviously impacting legislation, talking with your senators and congressmen. But at the end of the day, I think you still have to hold to your convictions. Like, if I was the president and something came to my desk that I just thought was not in line with where I was, I would veto it, right? And the way the American government works, it would go back to the Senate, and if they had enough votes, they could overrule my veto, right? But if they didn't, then at least I preserved my faith, my convictions in that moment, even if it gets overturned by the will of the American people who are represented in the House or the Senate. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because I feel like we saw a lot of that with voters and Trump this past election. There's a lot of things that people don't agree with Trump on, but they knew that he was the better option of the two. So they were willing to concede some of those stances, whether it was abortion, whether it was if he was going to go after same-sex marriage or not. But a lot of people knew that they didn't agree with him on certain issues, but others mattered more.
Right.
And they voted for him. So on the flip side of that, Romans 13 basically talks about the submission to governing authorities, and you kind of touched on that. So, like, how should Christians navigate that when those authorities go against biblical values?
I think you stand firm to obey what God has called you to do, even if it costs you everything. If it costs you your position in politics, if it costs you your job. I mean, you look at even in the book of Daniel. We're studying Daniel in our small groups, and Daniel talks about these guys that were brought over in exile, right? Babylonian exile, given new names, tried to be trained in the ways of Babylon, and here they are in the midst of trying to be reculturally programmed. King Nebuchadnezzar builds this statue, this tower, and all they have to do when the orchestra plays is bow down and worship. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Like, we know that it might cost us our life, but we're not going to do that. And so he gets mad. He finds out. They bring him in, right? And he's like, look, all you have to do, like, I'm going to give you one more chance, right? And at the same time, they're like, look, we must serve God. Like, our conviction is God is the true God, and we worship him only. And so Nebuchadnezzar gets so mad, throws him in the fire, right? And they realize, they basically say this, like, God is able even if he doesn't save us. Like, just because it might not turn out like you think it should or we think it should, we still hold fast to our convictions. And in the midst of that, we have one of the greatest stories ever, right? Like, they're in the fire, and there's the fourth person shows up, and Nebuchadnezzar's like, what's going on? People who threw them in the fire died because the fire was so hot. And they basically are like, God, like, Nebuchadnezzar comes out and says, the God you believed in was able to deliver you. And so at the end of the day, when it comes to, and we see this all through the book of Daniel, we see it other places in Scripture too. At the end of the day, what we really have to understand is that we, like when we die, our account is not how did we live our politics.
Mm-hmm.
Our account is, were we faithful to Christ?
Yeah.
And so, like, at the end of the day, like, I have to live in such a way that if I don't get elected because I have certain beliefs, okay, right? If I hold fast to obeying the God of this universe over what this government says, God has called me to obey him, right? And so I think even in Romans, we see, like, this idea of, like, you submit to God, you submit to the authorities you're under, but if your submission to authorities cause you to sin, you stop and you submit to God. And there's there's other places in Scripture we see this as well. So I think it's a balance, right? Like, I think it's what's happening though is people hide behind Romans 13 sometimes.
It's always
So continuing on the
what
subject of faith and politics, David, what role should the church, the Big C church, play in the political world? Like, should we...
and Little C Church.
Yes. Like,
Locally.
should we be active in the community? Should we be... and, I mean, I don't even know if I want to ask this, but, like, should this be preached in the pulpit? All those things. Like, what does that look like?
Active in the community, yes, right? If the biblical convictions... Well, first of all, you should serve and love your community, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that if a church that insulates themselves from the community is hard to call themselves a church to begin with, but
Definitely dying.
you're right. So yes, involved. I think the involvement should be more of individuals rather than the name of the church, if that makes sense. So, for example, here we are, the church at 905. If there's a march going on in downtown Conway, like, I don't think Langston should be like, all right, we're going to carry our banner. But if there are people who want to organize and be a part of that, they should be, right? They should be engaged and involved in those things. Now, I also, there's an old story about Michael Jordan selling shoes, and they asked him why he didn't come out. This is probably before your time, sorry. He'd come out and say, endorse a Republican or Democrat. And he was just like, well, Democrat and Republicans buy shoes. And so he was just like, I'm just going to be neutral. Like, at the end of the day, some people hide behind that. Churches hide behind that and like, well, we don't want to be a hindrance to the gospel. But the gospel speaks to some of these issues, right? The gospel is the answer to some of these issues.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't hide behind that. Like, we should be involved in gospel solutions to some of these real life cultural and community issues. So that's one of the part of that I would say yes. The second part is I don't think that a pastor should from the pulpit endorse a candidate. Like, I think that's off limits because the only person the pastor should endorse is Jesus. Right? That the pastor's job is to point to Jesus. However, the pastor has a responsibility to preach on biblical values that are in Scripture that then apply, and he can help show how that applies to real life situations.
There's an application.
Right. In any good sermon, right, there's a message preached, and the application should be, hey, when you walk out of these doors, this is how it impacts your life. Well, there's things that we're talking about that are easy applications that the pastor can make without saying, you have to vote for this person in order for this to be the case.
Yeah.
And so I do think there's a place, specifically even in political seasons, where some of these conversations can be healthy and good and done in a way where people think through the values and think through their convictions and think through what the Bible says without the pastor saying, you should vote for this person, and if you don't, you're not a Christian.
Well, I think that's so vital, like that, like from the pulpit, like the Sunday morning worship service, it is strictly like biblical, like Scripture being preached and edified and glorified, like praise in the name of Jesus. But then us working in campus ministry per se, like especially around election time, I love what you did. You invited in the conversation of like, hey, this is happening in the real world. You go to a secular campus where 27,000 different opinions are being formulated. Here's what the Bible says. Right. And so it warrants those conversations. So it's just like, I respect you for that, just because there has to be a place for that, because especially college students, we could speak to that like they're formulating their opinions right now, and some of them they're like, I don't know what the Bible says about
Right.
this, so I want to be taught.
Right.
So
I think a lot of pastors really get scared of like the whole tax exempt type thing when they start touching on marriage or they start touching on abortion. But when we were at Converge, Travis Agnew hit the nail on the head. He said, I know I'm going to talk about abortion. People might get, uncomfortable. Why is he talking about politics? He said, this isn't a political issue. It's a biblical issue. And I think that's like the mindset that people need to have is, yes, it might be today's political issue, but first it's a biblical issue.
Yeah, I think there's a guy named Dean and Sarah, who a pastor in Tallahassee. He said this, that people think that the church is getting more political, and it's not. What's happening is the politics is getting more biblical, right? And that government was originally set up for roads, for protection, these things, and now they're defining marriage, and they're speaking to life and the right to life. Like, they're the ones that are getting into biblical issues when the government's original intent was not that, right? And so it's not that the church is getting more political. The church has a right to speak into politics, specifically as our faith warrants.
yeah,
And so, yeah.
Well, like on the flip side of that, how do we navigate like trying to legislate to protect these biblical things? Because yes, we don't want the big government, but it's almost like we're at a point in history where we have to legislate things to protect it, like abortion. Like, that shouldn't be a government thing. It just shouldn't be allowed. But like, we have to protect it because it's a biblical thing. So how do we like go about that?
It's a great question. When you figure it out, I feel like we'll make it happen.
We'll do.
I mean, I think that it takes people, first of all, comprehending the complexity of the issue, right? It's a complex issue. It's a very simple issue, right? That God is the creator of life. That it says in Scripture that God forms us in the womb, right? That He is very, very active. And so when we talk about rights, we even talked about this last night we talked about God's design for sexuality and God's design for marriage, and that God is the designer, and when the designer designs, He's the one that gets to define.
yeah,
And so, like, understanding that is the framework for then how we determine what is
navigate.
how we navigate those things. And I just think there's a sense of our society where that whole piece is missing, right? And so in government, I do think it is. Like, we have a responsibility to protect the rights of the unborn, right? The right to life. But I also think the complexity of the situation for a lot of people is, what does it look like tangibly played out for abortion to be gone, to be gone? And when we say right to life and we are pro-life, does that mean from cradle to grave?
Womb to tomb?
Yeah, from womb to tomb. Like, where are we at in this process? And I just think that the grander picture is we have a general, and I say we, America specifically, but we have a general disdain for human life.
Yeah.
Like, we don't respect life at all.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And so I think we do what we can to speak value into the conversation, to organize, to figure out what it looks like to protect life, and to show that it's a better way.
Yeah, I know I keep bringing up abortion a lot, but that's a really good point, because I feel like the left does have a point to be made that, well, we just only care about, life in the womb, and that's not true for everyone. It's the Christians who are, setting up all these different nonprofits that help people in need and all that in our country. But we also need to reevaluate the adoption system. We need to reevaluate child tax credits, things like that, to make it affordable for people to have kids. And it's not just like banning abortion, that's it. Right. There's a lot of things that do play into it. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, a few more questions. So what advice do you have for Christians who want to get involved in politics but are kind of really scared to, because we live in a political climate where everything is so divisive and you get scolded for any belief that you have?
Let me know.
Don't do it.
I'm ready to get in. I'm ready to launch my political career. Let me know when it happens.
I know a good campaign manager.
I think, here's what I really think. I think the starting place is surrounding yourself with people willing to have conversations. If like there are people who get into politics, I feel like, just because they want to, they're drawn to the divisiveness, or they're drawn to the power, or they're drawn to some of that stuff. The true reason to get into politics is to serve for the welfare of the country, of your neighbors, right? Like that's the reason to get in, and the ability to influence and impact the society. And so if you want to do that, you have to be informed of issues. You have to be informed of the complexity of issues. You have to be willing to have conversations and learn. Like there's things that even probably today that I've gotten wrong, and you have to just be willing to talk them out to figure out, okay, what are those things? So for example, this is a perfect example. When Palestine and Israel have been going through this long, like there are people, dear friends of mine who think the complete opposite of me. And most people are afraid to have that conversation. And those two people have unique point of views because one of them served as a missionary in Gaza, loves Jesus, and lived among the people of Gaza for a long time. So her perspective is super unique of how she perceiving the situation. Another one of my friends who was here in America but has moved back home to Serbia, he has the viewpoint from experiencing conflict even in his home country, and definitely he sides more with Hamas and Palestine. And so like just understanding and having a conversation with him of why do you think this way? Like not being afraid to engage people who don't think the way you do is a huge starting point.
That's good.
Right? So, and even in that goal, when you're having conversations, specifically as you're entering into the political conversations and things, your job is not to immediately change the thought of the people you're having conversations with. It's to start understanding why people think the way they do. Right? Because then you can actually engage in conversation that's helpful and constructive for both parties. If all you're doing is like, I have this thing, this is the right way, like you're never gonna like build bridges and things. And what I like dream to happen, and specifically in the United States politics, is like I just feel like there used to be a sense of people working across the aisle, like finding common ground to work together. And so when they talked about bipartisan bills, it wasn't 52 to whatever. It was like 70 to 30, right? It was a sense of like, hey, we're bringing in a group of people who might not agree on everything, but we agree on this, and we're going to work towards this. Like I remember, I feel like I remember days where it was like that, where it wasn't just like whatever party won the election, they got to decide because they had the majority by 1 or 2 votes. And so I just want people to be able to have conversations. I think it's what people need. It's what will end the divisiveness. And you know what? Sometimes we get it wrong and we got to get called out on it, right? Or our thinking is narrow and things like that. And so, but I think people are afraid to have that because they don't want to be canceled right out of the gate, right? And so even in this, just having conversations off camera, having conversations and learning, going to things and trying to figure out, okay, like what is making these people feel this way? Even on Coastal's campus, I can't remember when this happened. It probably was last fall. There was a right to life protest on campus. Depending on who you talk to, there was different reasons why it was going on. And somebody asked me to get involved, and I was like I'm a campus missionary. Like, just to be completely honest, I don't need it, but I'll support you and have a conversation with you, whatever. And I just remember going and walking around and just trying to understand. Like people were yelling at each other and like really divisiveness. The cops were out there, and it was a sense of like I just want to learn why these people feel the way they do. Like what's making them tick one way or the other, and being able to bring people together. So I think that's the place to start if you want to be in politics. Because at the end of the day, it's not just like I just need to find the most Republican conservatives to vote for me. Like I want to bring people together for a cause, right? To make impact and change. And so
it's hospitality. Like biblically speaking, that is the love of strangers. And so, inviting them in. So I like that. What's your ideal, who's your ideal?
I was like, are you going to ask it?
I was asked to ask.
Oh gosh. Oh, here we go.
What does your ideal presidency candidate look like?
Not a who or what.
Not a who, not a specific person.
Yeah, not a who.
Because we looked to the 2028 election, and I'm like, who's going to be running?
I mean, yeah, you can tie it into that. So, like, President Trump can't serve another 4 years; he's going to be out. So, what would your ideal candidate look like, policy-wise, morals, and then you can say who you would like to see if you want.
I would like somebody who is younger. Like, we've had a lot of old presidents. I mean, Obama wasn't old, but Trump, and then Biden, and then Trump again. And I think it's shaping up to be a younger person. But I don't want younger just because of younger. Like, I want somebody who's experienced and is able to bring some mature people to the table. I think that, obviously, I want somebody who loves Jesus and who sees God as supreme to be that candidate, but not in a religious, pharisaical kind of way, but in a way of like, I want to bring about the welfare and nourishment of these people so that they could help. And even the way I treat people helps see Jesus. I don't see that person running for office for a while in America, just to be honest with you. When I look at who, I think J.D. Vance is a very, very intellectual vice president, and I think he'll be I think he'll be the next nominee for the Republican Party. Democratic Party, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? But I just think, and even with Vance, there's a lot of characteristics I like about Vance, but there's things I don't like. Sometimes
we're never going to find a perfect candidate.
Right. Sometimes I think Vance cusses just to cuss.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you just
to feel relatable.
You didn't have to say that. Yeah. It's just like you sound smart until you do something like that. I'm like, what are you doing? But there's things where Vance is just you can tell that he's a lawyer, right? He knows how to engage with people. So I like that part of it, but I also think that on some levels there's things about Vance I don't really like. So, but you're right. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to find the perfect person. I would love somebody who loves the Lord, right, and understands what that looks like from a personal relationship, but also then the responsibility to show people what grace-filled leadership looks like, what a servant leader looks like, who can be strong and yet full of grace. Right? You don't have to be ruling with an iron fist. It's a sense of I'm going to be a servant leader. And I don't know if that person would ever get elected president, just to be completely honest. But that would be an amazing characteristic trait to have. I think somebody who is not afraid of their convictions, but at the same time understands that just because they have a conviction doesn't mean that's going to become the rule of law in the land, right? That they understand that they represent all 50 states, not just
the red ones,
not just a red county in South Carolina. You know what I'm saying? So I think that I am not, let me just say this, I am not a Christian nationalist, right? I think that God is a God of the nations, but I am very, very grateful for the country that I was born in, for the country I grew up in. I love traveling. It's one of the things I love to do. I love going and visiting other countries, but I love living in the United States of America. And so to have a president who is proud of America in the sense of we have great things to offer.
Yeah.
And we can be better, right? And we can help the world flourish. But we don't need to be ashamed of the country in which we live in and the opportunities we have. Someone like that would be great for a candidate.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that JD's probably going to be the nominee, which I agree. Is there someone that you would like to see step up that's not him, or possibly a VP?
Charlie Kirk?
I don't know. I mean,
hot take. I have one. I'm not saying it. I'll get fired.
I mean, I think there's people out there, and it'll be hard to tell. The hardest thing, I think, for the next election cycle is going to be, and really, I think a lot of it will depend on, so this is just me forecasting, right? I think J.D. Vance is the natural choice if he wants it because of his vice presidential candidacy, because of his association with Trump. All the Trump people are immediately in his corner. So he's got all of those things there. I think unless he does something really, really dumb, he'll be the nominee. His VP, it'll come down to who he thinks would be a great addition to the ticket. This is another area where I just think the Democrats completely dropped the ball.
Yeah.
Like
With
I
Tim Walz?
had Kamala picked, and I think Shapiro turned her down. But had it,
I thought it was going to be him.
I think if Kamala had picked Shapiro, they would have won.
Yep.
But I think he turned her down because he knew that she had a good chance of losing, and he didn't want to train wreck his political career. So I think Shapiro is actually going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party in 4 years.
Ben?
No.
I was like,
Josh.
what?
Josh of PA.
This guy
Governor
says
PA.
Ben Shapiro.
I was like, there's no way.
I'm going to ask him that next week.
Yeah.
Hey, are you gonna
I
be
think
the
it'll be
nominee?
Josh Shapiro. So I think it'll be. But like I think that she went down the list and people told her no, and so she ended up with Tim Walz, which is a guy who basically offered her nothing. Like he was the guy that was like,
he offered to her goofy personality.
no, nothing though. Offered nothing. Like you think about it, Minnesota doesn't matter in the electoral college state for her.
Right.
Like it didn't. So he brought her absolutely nothing. In the like no bump to any other state. He's goofy. He's actually quite liberal, just like she is. So he doesn't even bring any votes more neutral in her corner.
Yeah.
And so it was like, to me, it was one of the, like when she picked him, it almost cemented that she had no shot to win it, because the very fact that she chose him showed what kind of president she would be. And people were like, we're not interested in that.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see, I think it'll be like someone like Shapiro, things like that. I'm interested to see if Vivek becomes governor of Ohio, if Vance, because him and Vance are really good friends. So I'm interested in if that dynamic, if he would pick Vivek to be a vice
I don't
president.
want that.
I don't want it either. I think Vivek actually has longer term plans of Ohio for maybe 8 years, and then move into the presidential thing at that point or something like that. So I just think there's a whole host of younger Republican candidates that are going to start to come out and play than there are Democrats. There's just not, like, Democrats have Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom.
I'm worried about a Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer ticket.
Yeah, I don't think Gretchen is respected nationwide. I mean, obviously she would help deliver Michigan, right? And Josh would help deliver Pennsylvania, which are two critical states in the electoral map. But I don't think either one of those. I mean, I do think that would be a powerful ticket, and I think that depending on if they were together, it would really depend on who Vance picks. But a lot of that would depend on how the next 4 years go, right? If inflation drops, if the cost of living goes down, if some of Trump's promises are, like, Vance is going to be a shoo-in.
Yeah.
Right? Because Trump will have kept his promises to Pennsylvania, to Wisconsin, to Michigan, to these states that really mattered in the end. If 4 years from now, if we're sitting here and the economy is exactly like it is now, cost of living is what it is, the tariffs don't work, these things, Vance has got no shot no matter how smart he is.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be, good luck, Mitt Romney. It's going to be one of those things. So I think it really, Vance's success will be determined by what happens the next 3 years.
Do you like Glenn Youngkin?
Until he opens his mouth.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's people out there. I'm interested to see. I get excited about some of the primaries.
Yes.
And I honestly, even though I vote conservative, I really wish they would have had a Democratic primary. I think it would have been bad for the Trump ticket, but it would have been, it's good for people, we even talking about getting in politics, having conversations. It's good for people to be on that stage and narrow down and put on record what they believe.
Right.
and to rub each other and try to figure out, okay, am I really committed to this idea?
Right.
Or is it just a talking point?
The funniest part of all that is we're trying to protect democracy. Trump's going to destroy democracy, when they literally went against the democratic process of electing someone.
The Democrats.
And I knew Joe Biden was not going to be the nominee. I knew that they were going to shoo him out. And I knew it was going to be Kamala. What I didn't know is what you alluded to. She would pick the dumbest choice of them all.
But I think that's.
but
I mean,
also, like-
I don't think anybody else wanted it.
Yeah. She was left.
Like,
to
who
the-
was she going to pick? Like, who else could she have picked? Like, other than like what we said, who would have told her yes that would have helped deliver the election?
Yeah, I have no idea.
There's nobody in Wisconsin that would have helped.
Yeah, because they were looking to 2028 already.
I
For sure.
I think this is just like, I know there's all these conspiracy theories. I really believe the Democrats knew they had to tank the Kamala campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Sure.
did. They did what they did to start it in motion, and they knew she would tank the rest herself.
And I think Nancy
that's exactly
Pelosi
what
was
happened.
one of the.
Yeah, I
puppet
think
masters
by
of it all.
getting rid of Joe, they knew they could at least salvage some House and Senate seats by showing that they were willing to do something different. But they knew they were going to lose the presidential seat. Because it had to be Kamala,
Yeah.
and she wasn't.
See, these episodes are fun. The others just make me want to
PJ,
cry and
thanks
feel
for
convicted.
inviting me here, man. It's been great talking with you. Really
Man.
enjoyed hanging out.
Next time, let's talk about sexuality, divorce.
We talked about
and
that
it's
last
good.
night
I know, and it
for
was
all those interesting.
fantastic. It was. That's why.
Did you learn anything today?
Yeah.
How the government is?
Yeah, actually, I was like, wow, these episodes are a learning thing for me. I should bring a notepad next time.
Yeah. Here you go. Okay. I said we were wrapping up a long time ago. I got one more question. It's a fun one, and then anything else that you have. But this one's for both of you. Donald Trump's been signing executive order after executive order, and I'm loving basically all of them. What is one executive order, if you had, it could be anything, what would it be and why?
Before we
It doesn't even have to be political.
I have two things to say about the executive orders first.
Yes.
And speaking out when I speak out against Trump. Okay, first of all, can we get something besides Sharpies that make that noise? Oh, it's so like
You hate that?
they used to when they signed bills back in the day. It used to be like a ballpoint pen or like whatever, and then they would hand them out. Like he's signing them with Sharpies, and I hate that. It's like the nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah, it's like styrofoam.
So, number two, I will go back to the executive order question in a second. The second thing is the one executive order I do not agree with, 100% do not agree with, is the blanket. And we can all disagree. We can have a conversation on January
J6 pardons.
J6 pardons.
Fully agree.
Like
with you.
there should have been a distinction between violent offenders and people that were just following the crowd in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
Right? They all had responsibility, 100%. Like they chose to enter into where they did. But there's a vast difference between pardoning people who were part of the walking in versus
Right.
people who actually assaulted police officers. So I vehemently disagree with that widespread pardon, and even kind of the dismissal of it. I think he made a huge mistake with that.
I'm actually shocked that he did do a full blanket because during the campaign, and I guess this is him just playing politics, but he said we're going to look at it by case basis. Even Pam Bondi said
That's what
that
she said in her
during
hearing,
her,
yeah.
and she didn't even get a chance because he did it. So I think he knew what he was going to do
Yeah.
and just appeased the right.
So I think he was wrong on that.
Yeah,
All right,
I
back
agree.
to the question. Executive question. For
Me-
Do you know what an executive order is?
Basically like a rule of law that
it's not necessarily
signified-
law.
Well, the one the women participating in
Yes.
male sports, like that one. I was I was keeping up with Twitter about this, or X, where somebody was like, it's only 40 people, and then they're like, correction, it's only 10 athletes that are being affected. Like, why is this and I'm like, because my future daughter, or the women now, that it matters for them
Because it's
Like,
10 more people. 10
yeah.
people that
and
should
it's an
be.
ideology that people are buying into. Like, we're living in a fantasy world and bringing cartoons to life almost. And so I'm all about that. I don't know about creating my own executive order.
I have
No,
one.
it can just be like anything, like a pet
He's
peeve
got
of
one.
yours
I've got one.
or
He's
anything.
got one.
Ready? If I was president, my first executive order in office would be to end daylight savings time.
Hey.
Okay. Now, you
Yeah.
have to clarify because a lot of people don't understand what you mean by this.
Which route are we going?
Do you want to keep
Which
it
route?
longer in the summer or
No.
darker earlier?
I want to keep it lighter in the summer.
Great.
All right.
Yes. I thought you were about to. I was like, hot take.
No. I want to keep it lighter in the summer. And the history. Do you know the history of a daylight savings time? All right. You probably don't know. Okay. That's okay. I don't know the full history either, but obviously the reason it exists, specifically in the United States, was primarily because of farming industry and working daylight hours during certain seasons and things like that. Like, it is something that is antiquated. We do not need it. It affects way too many things that, it doesn't make any sense. In fact, when we travel to other countries and they're like, I'm trying to keep up with what time zone and it doesn't make sense. One time a year it's this, and one time, like, it's just, I would say, let's just get rid of it. And I have little girls, and I'm going to tell you what, like, sleeping patterns for the first month after either way of change is crazy. And so, like, trying to put them to bed when it's dark and then not dark, but it's the exact same time, or like when they wake up and it gets light at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. versus 7 a.m., like, well, what are we doing here?
I agree with you.
So,
I like that. That's actually...
It's not like a political thing. It's just like, hey, let's just be done with this.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't know what mine would be. But I've always said that I want to get rid of whatever time that we have. I want to go to military time all over. And I don't care if it's 5 o'clock here and 5 o'clock in California and the sun is different. Why not?
It's just 5
make
o'clock.
it make sense.
So no time zones.
Right.
Really?
And have it on military time.
So what...
I don't know how I feel about that.
But, like, what does it hurt? It's just confusing.
Yeah. I think it...
Because we would land, hypothetically, in Los Angeles in a few weeks. If it stayed our time, be what, like 2 in the morning?
What time you land? 10?
No, 10.
It'd be 1.
1 a.m.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be. It'd be 10 here. It would just be different.
Wait, what?
Right? See,
This is my
I think
point.
I think that's more confusing. I mean, part of it's because
Wait.
we grew up that way, but it is, right? Like, if you leave, I think what makes it really confusing is when you go from one place to another.
Yeah.
Right. But when you're doing business, like, for example, if I'm ordering goods from another country and it's 8 p.m. my time, it's 8 a.m. their time, like, they're there. But if it was 8 p.m. their time in the middle of the day, so that means that their daytime is nighttime? See,
Well,
that's just kind of confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're already ahead of us
What is this like? Why is this a conflict for you, though?
because
It's 20 hours right now. It's 20 hours. What does that mean? Do you even
I mean, I just don't know why we don't have military time and then the whole time zone things. I just
You
don't
can
get
say
anyway.
the military
because
time
not
thing.
all states abide by the same time zones. Like, some states are split in half, which doesn't make sense to me. You can stand on this side and then be in one time zone, this side on another time zone. And I guess it has to do with the sun at a certain spot.
It's
I don't
good.
know.
It's good.
I
How
just
long have
don't
you
like
been
it.
pondering that one?
Someone asked me that a couple weeks ago, and I said, let's just get rid of it. And then they were like, but, like, if it's 7 o'clock here and you're getting up for work, it's not going to be 7 o'clock over there. I'm like,
I'm going to
yes, it
tell
is.
you this. I have to change my answer. If I was the president immediately after you, my first executive order would be to undo your executive order.
Undo everything.
I would make Raising Cane's the fast food restaurant.
Okay,
That's
we're
a good
having
one.
a
That's a good one.
conversation.
That's a good one.
I was somebody texted me yesterday and said, "Hey, my daughter's going to be in Times Square this weekend. Where she should go eat?" My first place was Los Tacos #1, like, because I was like, "There's some expensive place." First of all, if you go to New York City, Times Square is a Touron trap, all right, and so don't eat a lot of food in Times Square. There are like niches of places you can go that have great food. Sometimes you have to pay a little money but like Times Square in general is just where all the tourists hang out. All right. So, but if you're going to eat in Times Square, first of all, Los Tacos #1. So that's on the list. Great taco spot. They also have one in Madison Square Garden. They have one over by Grand Central Station and then one down the Chelsea Market. Fantastic. But #2, I said, hey, for her budget, there is a Raising Cane's. I know it's a chain, but it is a great experience.
They have
that
a
one
live
specifically.
DJ.
They got a live DJ, a disco ball. The place is happening. In fact, I'm going to New York City this weekend, and I'm probably going to go to Raising Cane's.
If you do, I'm going to actually give you money to pick me up one of those hats.
I might, because my daughters actually like Raising Cane's, and they don't know they're going to New York City. We're surprising them on Friday. But that's a great place.
This comes out Friday, so that's good.
They won't listen to your
Yeah,
podcast.
well, they're
I
gonna
hate
sit
to
down.
break. Hate to break.
Hey,
it.
Dad, can we please put on the Battle Belongs
They
podcast?
might be like, well,
They
Dad's
know
on-
the Niece's Nuggs podcast, but they don't know about
Yeah,
the Battle
but-
Belongs
They're the
podcast.
intro.
But they might be like, well, Dad's on it. Let's listen.
They probably would, and
They probably,
maybe
like, stop 5
I'll
minutes
let
in.
them listen to it on the way to New York City.
Yeah,
They have
you think
no
they're
idea
going
what we're
to sit?
talking
Yeah,
about.
politics.
Hey, educate your kids.
Trust me, we talk about it. They know who's president. They know a lot about politics. They might even rival PJ right now.
You know, I'm glad we know who the president is because the last 4 years I really didn't know. Any final thoughts?
No, great episode. Great episode. Next time I get to choose the topic.
You've chosen the topic for the past 10 weeks, 20
Yeah.
episodes.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
This is my last thing. If you got to pick the topic today, what would you have talked about with me?
We would have talked about sexuality, divorce, and marriage.
But
Well,
you
not
got,
marriage.
you
not
guys talked about that with Keith Autry last week.
No, we talked about marriage with Keith Autry, but I want to talk about the flip side. I want to talk about, I just think their divorce is a topic, biblically speaking, that people circle and they circle around it because they're like people are easily shunned, or
People get their feelings hurt.
like if there is a controversial matter within a divorce, we kind of just avoid it. Like we know it's happened, but we're not going to talk about it. I think last night we covered every aspect possible, which is good, especially for a young adult to kind of just zone in on. But then on the flip side too, sexuality and the selfish desires that we have as people, not just male or female, but just how it's ruining the private world that then affects the public world, that and so forth. So just chasing that rabbit. Yeah.
Maybe next year I'll come back on the podcast.
Next year?
Oh, wow.
Good
It
night.
took us a long time to get me on this one. So
That's true.
Whose fault's that?
It's probably mine.
Man's a busy
I feel
guy.
like
He's
I feel like
traveling
we
all over the
need
world.
a political contributor, and that's going to be you. So anytime there's like some hot,
Topic.
yeah,
I'm in.
and then I'll just bring you on,
I'm
like
in.
to get your take and the landscape, and then you can learn.
Can I just do the questions?
Yeah. How about you interview us next time?
Okay. I won't even know what I'm
Let's
like. How do you even say
let's
this
find-
word? Legislation.
What does this word mean?
Yeah, guys.
Persecutionists.
Yeah, don't even. I was looking at the computer the whole time. Hey,
Nice.
thanks for
I go to
joining.
CPAC next week. Should I film an episode there? I feel like I should.
Okay,
With Donald Trump.
sure.
Where is it at?
D.C. at the Gaylord. Well, Maryland, I guess.
Next week or this weekend?
Next week. I fly out Monday. The conference is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You can get your tickets at cpac.org, and I come back Sunday.
How often does CPAC have a conference?
So our main yearly one
Are we
is
still
just
filming?
just
Okay.
once a
This is
year.
good questions.
Just once a year.
So this
in
is the main
February.
one?
This is the main one.
Okay, it's in February every year?
Yes.
Okay.
But we also do like international conferences too. So I went to Budapest, Hungary in May of 23.
I like the way you said that.
Budapest.
Yeah. Little SH there at the end.
That's how you say it. I didn't
Yeah.
know that until I went.
Budapest.
That's how I felt like a little hick in there, like it's pest.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Yeah, you gotta have
We
the
do
H.
Argentina, we do China, or not China, we do Japan. I think they're trying to set up a Brazil one, so they're trying to like spread
What
conservatism.
if you went to China? What if you had a CPAC in China?
See, okay.
Or in
so-
Russia?
So I talk about like my dream aspirations if I had a choice of what I want to do. I want to be like a war journalist and like go to these war-torn
Like Ukraine
countries
right
like
now.
Ukraine, Israel. I would love to go to Israel right now and go tour where the massacre happened and just cover that. But then like also go into like China and understand why they are the way they are.
I really want to go to Palestine and go in the tunnels.
Yes.
Like that fascinates me right
Yes.
now. Is the tunnel system they have built.
Well, Langston's going to Israel next year. You can come with us.
I really
that's
need-
not news. You can't.
Yeah, it is. He said it at church.
You did?
Yes. Sunday.
I have a question.
Maybe it was Friday or Wednesday.
So one of our hostages from Russia was just released, right?
I saw that.
And they were talking about him flying back, and I don't know if you know this, PJ, that he was arrested on entry in 2021 for medical marijuana, and he was sentenced for having medical marijuana to like 14 years of hard labor, something like that.
In America or Russia?
He was in Russia.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I did. I think
And he
I
just
have
was.
heard
He
the
just
story.
Trump just brought him back
Mhm.
yesterday. And I was like, when they were talking about this, I was listening to it. I was listening to talk radio or something yesterday when they were talking about that. And in my mind, I was like, man, I just have I would love to go to Russia at some point.
Yes.
But I have no desire to put myself in a position where I could have some random thing. Not that I have medical marijuana friends, but like something that I would immediately sentence me to hard labor in
Yeah,
Russia. I'm like, I don't
right.
even want to take that chance. I mean, I like taking chances, but I'm like, man, this guy. And the same thing happened with Brittany Griner.
I was just going to say, it's funny how the right said leave her there, but then they're praising Trump for bringing this guy home.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I think that experience even shaped some of her, like, America's really not that
Yeah.
bad. Like, when she's got back, she's kind of played it to a different tune
Yeah.
since she experienced that. But yeah, man, like, I would love, like, I want to see the world,
Yeah.
right? And I have a student former student who's teaching in Russia.
Mm.
And so, like, I would love to go at some point, but I want to go under
Like diplomatic
the assurance
relations.
that I can get out. You know, like,
Yeah,
but-
people complain about how bad America is. You just take a trip across the pond and see what other
Yeah.
countries are like.
yeah.
You'll be begging to come back home. Anything else, gents?
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, thanks for finally showing up.
Check out Neace's
Appreciate
Nugs on
Yeah,
every
where
platform.
can
Hey,
Where
yeah,
people
how was
find you?
how was the podcast helpful for you for your New York City trip? Was it helpful?
Yes. If you have any travel questions, Neace's Nugs was actually the guidance for me to take the subway, the food spots, and basically all the tourist attractions to both go to and avoid. So, subway was definitely the move. I will stand on that.
never go on that thing.
Oh, I felt great, and I paid the
Ugh.
least amount of money.
I'm gonna tell you this right now. So we're doing a mystery trip in a month. If Coleton were on my mystery trip, I would take him to the most liberal cities. That would be the mystery. Would be every liberal city that he
Hey,
would
I'm
not
down.
want to go to. He would have to spend 24 hours there with me.
Be like Alex.
Let's
in
do
New
it.
Orleans.
Wait, that's a good
Wouldn't that be a fun
YouTube
trip?
video.
It would be a great
Let's
trip.
do it sometime.
Like, and I would take you down the subways and show you like how to stand and like where like
Keys in the
This
front.
is-
keys to look out for, things like that. Make sure you're not getting pickpocketed.
Oh,
all
I
those
can't take
kind
my
of things.
gun to California. That's
No, and not New York either.
Yeah, I know.
There's a harsh penalty for that.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be an awesome experience, wouldn't it?
Let's do that. We can go to like Chicago. We can
I
go to
love
San
Chicago.
Francisco.
Like all these
Yeah,
cities
I
you're
listened
naming.
to the Chicago one right after.
Chicago's one of my favorite cities. It's totally corrupt, but one of my favorite cities as far as just
I think
like
I
Did you
actually
see
listened
Lori
to that
Lightfoot?
episode.
I mean Beetlejuice.
Didn't you go to Chicago and then Boston? right
been
after?
to Boston. Yeah, I took our
Boston's not
leaders
that
to
bad.
Chicago and Boston.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the leader trip.
The
but
leadership
it's still a mystery.
trip. They didn't know where they were going. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Dude's a guru.
That's such a good YouTube video.
yeah,
Dragging a hard right conservative to all these liberal places.
that'd be fun.
Can he survive?
We'll start in San Francisco.
Word.
Actually,
I'll
we'll
poop
start
on
in
the
we'll
street.
start in Los Angeles.
Do you poop on the street there?
Do I?
In
Yeah.
Los
I do
Angeles.
not participate in illegal activities, though they might be overlooked. I do participate in jaywalking, though.
Interesting.
Yeah.
911.
Suggestions.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Battle Balance podcast. We'll see you next week.